Welcome to the rNAS setup tutorial series. In this tutorial series, you will learn everything you need to know to get your rNAS ready for use. The series is broken into 7 sections and will take you through the physical setup, connecting to the web interface, configuring the network ports, creating the RAID, creating the volume group, creating the logical volumes and network shares, and creating users and assigning them share permissions. Let's get started with an overview of the rNAS hardware and how to properly set it up. Located on the front of the rNAS is the power supply, drive bays, network interface ports, and an LED screen. Each rNAS contains up to 8 2.5-inch hot swappable drives that are secured in place. There are 4 network interface ports, including 2 10 gigabit ports and 2 1 gigabit ports. There is also an IPMI port used for advanced configuration at the hardware level. There is an LED screen on the front of the rNAS that lists the IP address of each port as well as the remaining unused storage capacity. To begin setup, attach power cables to the rNAS power supply and press the power button. Once the rNAS is ready, the IP addresses will display on the front LED screen. To connect the rNAS to a network or device, plug a network cable into the desired port. The connected port number will become bold and green on the LED screen to signify the specific port has a valid network connection. Now that the rNAS hardware is set up, we will move on to connecting to the web interface and configuring the rNAS. The rNAS interface allows you to manage the rNAS configurations, including network port addresses, network shares, and permissions. The first step is to connect a computer to the rNAS. This can be done by connecting a network cable directly from the computer to a port on the rNAS, or by connecting both the computer and a port on the rNAS to a network switch. The next step is to identify the IP address of the rNAS port that the computer is connected to. The LED screen on the front of the rNAS lists the IP address for each port corresponding to the number on the ports. After identifying the IP address of the rNAS port you are connected to, you will need to put the computer on the same subnet. At this stage, you will be able to access the rNAS web interface from your computer. To do so, open an internet browser and type the IP address of the rNAS port you are connecting to. A login screen will appear. Enter the root user credentials and click Login. This will bring you to the rNAS web interface, where you can configure and manage the rNAS settings. At this stage, we have connected to the rNAS web interface and are ready to set the IP addresses of the network ports. To configure the ports, click on Network and select TCP/IP in the expanded submenu. In the top section titled NICs, you will see settings for port EN01 through EN04, which correspond to ports 1 through 4 on the rNAS. To change the settings of a port, click the Edit button in the far right column. Doing so will populate the configuration section with the selected port's current settings. You could change the port's address by editing the IP address field. After changing the address, click the Apply button. Select OK on the confirmation pop-up. If you change the IP address of the port you are currently accessing the rNAS on, you will lose connection and will need to reconnect to the web interface using the new address. Now that we have configured the network port IP addresses, we can move on to creating the storage RAID. The RAID is used to combine the physical drives into a logical unit for data redundancy and performance optimization. To create the RAID, click on Storage and select Internal RAID from the expanded submenu. If the RAID has already been configured, you could skip this step of the rNAS setup and move to volume group creation. If no RAID exists, click on the blue link to access the RAID Manager interface. After clicking the link, a new browser tab will open and prompt you for credentials. Enter the RAID Manager's credentials. To create the RAID, click on RAID set functions and select Create RAID Set from the expanded submenu. Check the box for each available drive slot, check the Confirm the Operation box, and click Submit. You will receive a RAID set created successfully confirmation. After creating the RAID set, click on Volume Set functions and select Create Volume Set from the expanded submenu. Select the RAID that was created in the previous step and click Submit. This will bring you to a volume configuration page. For this setup, we suggest changing the volume RAID level to RAID 5 and the volume stripe size to 1024 kilobytes. After these changes are made, check the Confirm the Operation box and click Submit. You will receive a volume set created successfully confirmation. You can now close the Browser tab for the RAID Manager and return to the internal RAID section of the rNAS web interface. Upon hitting refresh in the bottom right corner, you will see the RAID that was just created appear. With the hardware RAID set up, we will now create a volume group for our network shares. The volume group designates the RAID as a workspace for our logical volumes and network shares. To configure a new volume group, click Storage and select Volume Group from the expanded submenu. If a volume group is already configured, you could skip this step and move on to creating logical volumes. Select the available physical volume, make sure that LVM is selected, and click Create VG. Click OK on the confirmation pop-up. You will now see your new volume group inside the Volume Groups section. Now that we have a volume group, we can create logical volumes and network shares. Logical volumes are the space allocated to a network share within a volume group. Each logical volume that is created will also create a new network share. To create a new logical volume, click Storage and select Logical Volume from the Storage expanded submenu. In the Create Logical Volume section, select the volume group that was configured in the previous step. Ensure that the volume type is set to XFS. Provide a name for the volume. This will also be the name of the network share that gets created. Provide a size for the network share. The free space remaining in the volume group is shown in the drop-down where the volume group was selected. If you are planning to create a single share, you should set the volume size to the maximum available free space. If you are planning to create multiple shares, you will need to create a logical volume for each share and can allocate the size accordingly. Once the logical volume inputs are set, click Create. Select OK on the confirmation pop-up. You will now see the new logical volume in the Logical Volume section. Repeat this step for any additional shares you would like to create. To confirm each share was created, click on Services and select SMB/CIFS from the expanded submenu. In the Shares section, you will see a new share for each logical volume that was created. The path of each share should follow the format of /exports/sharename. You can also enable other share services such as AFP by navigating to their respective sections within the Services submenu. With our shares configured, we will now make users and assign them permissions to access the shares. To create rNAS users, click on Account and select Local User in the expanded submenu. The user list shows existing users, and the Create section is where we will create new users. First, provide a username and a description of the user. Next, choose a secure password and enter it in the Password and Confirm Password fields. Lastly, ensure that the UID is unique to your new user. Click Create and select OK to the confirmation pop-up. You will now see your new user in the User List section. At this point, you are ready to assign your user permissions to access the network shares. To get to the network share permission settings, click on Services and select SMB/CIFS in the expanded submenu. Click on the Edit button of the share you would like to assign your users permission to access. In the Access Control section, you will see a Group/User List section that contains your users. Select these users, click the Super User option in the Permissions section, and click Add. You will now see your users added to the assigned users list. You have now completed the rNAS setup and can begin to use the shares that were created.